Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the official YouTube channel of the Faculty of Natural Sciences of Eötvös Loránd University. My name is Attila Császár, and I will be one of your guests during the next 45 hopefully quite interesting minutes. As part of our 3 days long section of the 35th National Scientific Students Association's conference, and taking advantage of the online nature of our OTDK conference, we, the organizers, planned 4 roundtable discussions for the lunch and dinner breaks of Monday, that is today, and Tuesday. These roundtable discussions are about the past, present, and future of chemistry, chemistry being for all of us the central science. Hopefully, we all share a common interest in understanding how chemistry and society should interact and support each other. Chemistry, as much as we chemists make it, so we invited 4 past, present, and future presidents of chemical societies for these roundtable discussions. You are watching the first of these roundtable discussions. Let me introduce to the audience the participants of our first roundtable discussion. Our distinguished guest is Professor Dr. Peter Richard Schreiner, President of the German Chemical Society. Welcome, Professor Schreiner, and thanks for accepting our invitation. The further participants who will try to square a circle are Professor Ágnes Szabados, Professor István Szalai, and myself. We 3 are heads of the organizing and executive committees of the section Chemistry and Chemical Industry of the 35th National Scientific Students Association's conference. It is our privilege to lead the discussion with Professor Schreiner. Nevertheless, you are not left alone. While you're watching this conversation via a YouTube channel, you can also address questions to Professor Schreiner, who is happy to answer them. I strongly encourage you to ask questions, and our moderators on the YouTube channel will notify us about these questions, and we will ask them from our guest. You may ask your questions either in Hungarian or in English, whichever you find more convenient. If our distinguished guest would leave this channel, I would like to assure him that the questions will be asked by us in English. Now, let me introduce to you Professor Schreiner. So Professor Schreiner, our first guest for the planned 4 roundtable discussions with presidents of chemical societies in Europe and the US, was properly introduced as Professor Dr. Schreiner. The explanation is that he is not only a professor in the Institute of Organic Chemistry of Justus-Liebig-Universität in Gießen, but in fact, he does have 2 PhDs. One of his 2 PhDs is in synthetic organic chemistry, while the other one is in computational chemistry. Professor Schreiner has been interested in a number of topics, including organocatalytic reactions and methods, related, for example, to thioureas and oligopeptides, in nanodiamonds, that is diamondoids, all as building blocks as well as materials, for example, in organic electronics, in matrix isolation of reactive intermediates, for example, carbenes, and in computational chemistry. During the last decade, he has been paying particular attention to experimental and theoretical studies on quantum mechanical tunneling. His group consists of scientists from the People's Republic of China, Germany, Iran, the Czech Republic, Ukraine, and the United States of America. Thus, besides interesting conversations about science and more, this leads to a tangle of voices and smells in the kitchens of his group. So now, Peter, let's start with the first question, if you are ready.
I'm ready.
So, could you please let us know how your interest in synthetic organic and computational chemistry helped your career as a researcher and as a university professor? In other words, could you please formulate, based on your own educational and research experience, a general advice to the next generation of chemists concerning the dichotomy of experiment and theory in chemistry? Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Attila. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this very exciting symposium. So thank you very much for giving me a little space to discuss with you. And I invite all of you, of course, to ask me questions. We don't have to stick very firmly to the program, so more student questions, the better it is. Now, you asked me, why did I go for 2 PhDs? Well, that was not an intentional thing. it was more my quest for understanding chemistry better. Organic chemistry is extremely successful, and it's amazing what organic chemists can do in terms of producing natural products, medication, all kinds of things. But I always felt as a student, and even now, that the theory behind these reactions and the structures lacks. It's far behind our actual technical and hand skills we have in the lab. So I wanted to understand organic chemistry better and penetrate the theory. But theory was really a separate subject. You know, there is organic, inorganic, physical, and theory, and they're all separated into their silos, and they don't talk to each other much. I mean, at least in the past, it was the case. We're talking 30 years ago. So I always thought bridging this gap is very important and necessary to really make an advance. And so I said, well, you have to study both. And some people told me, make a decision. Are you going to be a theoretician or a practicing organic chemist? And I said, no, I don't want to separate myself. I want to do both. And it was looked upon as being crazy. But then I realized I have to invest just a little bit more time in my education and really learn both from scratch and try to make them merge. And that is exactly how I do my research. It's the merger of synthetic organic chemistry with a very solid theory behind it. And as an advice for young people, always seek such situations where you realize that you need knowledge from another, of course, related discipline that really will enhance the one you actually want to go for. You can see this now, for instance, in something that's called synthetic biology. And for me, this is really the merger of organic chemistry, biochemistry, and biology. And a lot of biologists have to suddenly really hardcore study the traits and the skills of organic chemistry, and vice versa. Many organic chemists want to understand a lot more biology. So it's in a similar way doing something that I have done many years before in two other disciplines. But as an advice, generally, it's very good to take two subjects that seem to be loosely connected and connect them much more strongly in your own research.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Now, during your introduction, it was mentioned that you work on a number of topics, or you and your group are working on a number of topics. So if you had to single out one topic of these many research topics you and your group pursue, which one would you choose? Which one would be most interesting and most important to chemistry and to yourself? Is it possible to single out one such topic?
I think it's a bit unfair towards the students, because not everyone is working on that particular topic. But they may be listening, so I don't want to single out something that I like more than others. But let me put it this way. The topic that is always really triggering my interest is the one I understand very little of. And I could single out, for instance, all the things that are related to quantum mechanics, the consequences of quantum mechanics in chemistry. They're not fully explored yet. Of course, we have molecular orbital theory, we have highly accurate computations. That's one aspect. But let's look at just two aspects that my research group follows that are just quantum mechanical. And that's, for instance, tunneling reactivity. So molecules reacting not over, but through barriers. That is really something that beriddles me to this day, how I should think about that. So I cannot claim that I really understand it fully. And the second one is dispersion interactions. So the spontaneous polarization of electronic clouds that make molecules stick together. Neither one has a classical analog. So it's very difficult to develop a mental picture of what is happening in these two aspects of chemistry. And that is how I feel at the moment. I'm in the descriptive stage, but haven't penetrated it yet. And of course, such topics really are extremely exciting. So if I had to single out one, then I would say it's that the quantum mechanical effects of an organic chemistry.
Yeah, so I'm sure most of the audience heard about tunneling. Can you explain a little bit the fascinating world of weak interactions like dispersion interaction?
Well, it is quite fascinating. Let's go back. So let's stick with a quote by J.D. Thunderballs. In these interactions are often called Thunderballs interactions, and they encompass both the attractive and the repulsive interaction. And Thunderballs said something very simple, but fundamentally very important, and that is everything always sticks together. And this really has to sink in your brain. For instance, if I ask what's a chemical bond, then that's an agreement between 2 or 3 or many more chemists saying that, anything that's stronger than 5 kcals I call a chemical bond. Then a physicist would say, oh, there's the helium dimer. Isn't that a bond? It also sticks together. So it makes some kind of bonding. So it's that weak interaction that we have the hardest time with. The weaker the interactions, the more difficult they're to grasp, because everything we do in real life is pretty strong and macroscopic, but in the microscopic world, that is difficult. So dispersion interactions, the sticky part, is really what holds everything together at the very end. If you think of very low temperatures in space, then at these temperatures things move very little and they still stick together somehow. And that is really what makes the fascination. And especially how to use that in synthetic chemistry. Now, how can you think about this? Things sticking all the time. Which functional groups are more sticky than others? How can you use that in your next synthesis?
Thank you very much. I see that Agnes has questions, so let's turn to Agnes.
Thank you very much. I would take over and I would ask you about the pandemic that we all experienced in fear. But it also brought science once again back to the forefront of popular attention. Scientists are interviewed, and the scientific method became a discussion in many circles. What do you think about the advantages and disadvantages of this situation? Will this have a long-term effect on how society views science in general and chemistry in particular?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Thank you for bringing it up. It is one of the very, very few positive aspects of this terrible pandemic that science suddenly has more value, so it seems, in the public eye. I think deep down people know that scientists strive for truth. That is basically our motivation. We want to find how nature works and what the truth behind the mechanisms are. So I think people generally believe scientists more than they do believe politicians. We all know that politicians are not that close to the truth sometimes, definitely not as close as scientists. So also seeing a scientist on TV saying something that affects us all, like a virologist, we have, and you have this in your country as well, somebody with an expertise in virology suddenly being in the public eye, something wonderful to see. There's a second aspect, and I think this is even more important. The public has to learn that scientists actually cannot suggest solutions. They analyze the situation and they basically depict scenarios. What could happen? What if? So the numbers increase dramatically, and then our hospitals will no longer be able to deal with it. But they don't suggest solutions. They don't say we need to go on lockdown or wear masks or whatever. It's the politicians that have to make these decisions, take these decisions. And that is also important for the public to know, that scientists do not have ready-made solutions, but they can at least develop and provide the data we need. Chemistry, unfortunately, will not benefit directly from the pandemic or the public image of the pandemic, because most people don't know that all the vaccines are essentially the product of an advanced chemical lab. And many of the starting materials come straight from chemistry companies. Most people believe that the drugs are made by medical doctors because they have that high standing in society. So I think we need to tell them everywhere we can that it is really mundane chemistry that makes us produce these wonderful weapons against the COVID-19 virus.
Thank you very much. I would now switch to research-related topics, and the next question is about choosing a research subject. So you have a truly international group, and when you choose a research topic, how do you specify this topic? What are the main concerns when you do this?
That's a very good question. I think I could get rich if I knew a perfect answer. So let me give one from the gut. I would say the scientific topics find me. It's not that I find them. I know that a lot of people, when they give talks, they explain and show how smart they are and how they have thought about things. And sometimes that may be true. In most I am back.
He's back.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that, but
actually we left off.
These things happen. This is live.
Yeah, we left off
you were
when
asking
that
about
the topics find you, which I like
yes.
really as an answer. But could you elaborate more, because I think you were.
Yes. So basically, if I make an observation, that means a student makes an observation and comes to my office and says, look, this is what happened. Then I have to figure out, is this something I can readily explain, or is this rather surprising and not easily explicable? And then I try to decide whether it's worth pursuing. Now, this requires also that you have to know the standard models of your scientific discipline. So I think, since it's good to know for the students to define a good topic, you need to know what are all the standards that are given, have been given in your discipline over the last centuries. What is the stage of the knowledge, so you can see that little delta, that difference in what has been observed and what is different from your research.
There is an interesting question related to this topic, and that is deciding on when to publish. So at what stage do you feel that that this is the point when to disseminate the results? And another related question is how to decide where to publish, which journal to choose.
Yeah, I would say a paper is ready when the answers, or when the paper answers the original questions that were given in a topic to a degree that no further significant advance can be made in a reasonable time span. And that reasonable time span is typically, the time it takes for a PhD or things like that. Or usually it's less than that, maybe a year or something like that, where you can actually work on a topic. So we answer questions, and with our research, in the moment you said, I can give a firm answer to those questions and reformulate an even better questions, that's what science is about, then it's time to publish it and take it into the public domain so other people can, object to it or say, yeah, I agree, and we've learned something. In terms of journal, it's very simple. We always aim for the best. And I I think that's a fair statement, because we should always, as scientists, try to do our best work and then publish it in the best of journals. My group is very lucky in that sense that we often make very small molecules, and molecules that have not been made before because they're tricky to make. So they're very fundamental in terms of their structures and reactivities. And so we can typically target, the best of journals like Angewandte and JACS, or Chemical Science, Nature Chemistry, and so forth. Once the topic is more developed, then of course we go for the very specialized journals that allow us more space to elaborate on our findings.
When you say best, you mean impact?
Yes and no. Of course, impact does play a role, but mostly for me, the most important is which and how many people can I reach? Do I reach the audience that I can address my paper to? So are the readers the right readers for this kind of topic? That's very important. What's the distribution of a journal? What's the accessibility? It makes no sense if nobody can download it because the journal is too expensive, or it's not widely distributed, or any kind of other reasons. So it's a mix of criteria that are needed to decide which journal to send a paper to.
Thank you very much. Now we would turn to another point of view, and that's about giving scientific presentations. So the audience of our present audience is probably mostly made of students who are actually presenting their own scientific results at this conference. And it would be interesting to get your views about how we can put together a successful presentation. When you put together a talk, how do you prepare and build your presentation up?
That's an excellent question, and my answers will probably surprise some of you. I would say, and maybe I'm speaking just for myself, but when I go to a talk, to a conference, I'm not that interested in the data. And generally, people, I don't think they want to listen to long lines of data and tables and graphs and everything. I think rather they want to know the story behind the research. So how did the idea come about? What were you thinking first? What hypotheses did you formulate, and which fell apart during the course of the research? I think the human element is what they want to know about. I can also tell you, of course, you can put it like a theater piece. Your research is a real life theater. It's just so that the object is a different one from typical theater. There's a grand prize, and that's the solution to a scientific problem. That's the Holy Grail. There's a villain, a bad guy, perhaps a competitor who wants to go to the solution first. There's a hero, that's the student working and doing everything. And of course, there's the storyteller, and that's you, that's the presenter. So I think this is really what people want to know. They want to be told stories, and you take home stories. All of you remember fairy tale stories from the Brothers Grimm. These are the first things we hear. And in a way, a presentation should be of a similar color. It's not a paper. If I really want to get down to the data, I read the SI of the paper, and then I analyze them myself very critically, or I read the text that is in the paper. But in a presentation, people want to have the human element. A little advice for everybody, I think, is also to use very little text, use graphical elements, and very little color. Make it simple for the eye and for the ear.
Thank you very much. I think this is a wonderful take-home message. Even though there is no villain in the present discussion.
Right.
Yes, good.
And I see that Professor Szalai has questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Attila. So I would go into a little bit other direction. sometimes researchers take some responsibilities. You know better than me, as you have been the head of department, vice president for the research of Justus-Liebig-Universität in Gießen, and now the president of the German Chemical Society. So, just not to waste the time, my simple question is, what are your main goals as president of the German Chemical Society? What do you want to reach or change, if there is anything to change?
Well, you know, Petronius Arbiter 64, before the Common Era, said any new leader will always initiate change, because the constant change will give us the impression of constant improvement, while it actually frustrates people. So I think we should take this to heart, generally speaking, and not try to change everything. I think that the society has been in excellent shape, and of course, one can always, you know, try to make things better. Any planning I've had, mostly, not all, went down the drain with the pandemic. You know, I started my term January 1st, 2020, and in March, we were already in the first lockdown. So we had to deal with all kinds of problems, like canceling conferences and training schools and all these things. There's a lot of costs involved in all these things for organization, rentals, and all kinds of other things. So that was my first thing I had to do. A second aspect was that cost a lot of time was the restructuring of Angewandte Chemie, which is owned by the German Chemical Society. So most people are not aware of that. But it's basically our main scientific outlet. Some of you may remember there was a paper that many found offensive that was ultimately removed and then triggered a restructure of the Angewandte Chemie. That has taken a lot of time as well. And I can tell you that most of this has happened, and this is nearing the end. When it comes to things I really want to get going and still want to get going, and it's working, is I'm very much in favor of digitization. So the digital age has to move into the societies as well, starting from, you know, conferences of this sort that we experience here. But for the German Chemical Society, I really wanted to have an app for, you know, your smartphone. So you have everything in your pocket, the entire society in the pocket. And I can tell you it's nearing completion. We're in the beta testing stage now, and it'll be announced at the big Science Forum Symposium, August 29th through September 1st. That's a virtual symposium, of course, with, you know, thousands of people from all over Europe and the world. And we'll be presenting it there for the first time. So this is one of the things that we could do apart from all the problems we have to solve related to the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Just a little bit maybe connected, but not directly. So I would like to know, or maybe it would be interesting to know, how popular is chemistry actually in Germany and in chemical education? Do you have an increasing number of students, or what is the actual tendency? And do you feel that there is a difference, or a serious difference, between the education of chemists and chemical engineers?
Now, to start with the second one, in Germany, chemical engineering and chemistry, they're well separated from each other. It's a different discipline. You know, one is, as the name says, is an engineering discipline. Some of that is not taught at the university, but at technical schools or specialized technical universities. And the engineers really have their own way of structuring their studies. And I think they're well advised, and they've followed their own advice to not adopt the Bologna system to the degree all the other subjects have done it, because the engineering degree in Germany is extremely well recognized also in the world. And so they kept to their traditions of doing it without the Bologna route. Chemistry, by and large, it's really hard to say. I think the general opinion is that chemistry is always a tough subject. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really difficult. And that the numbers basically fluctuate. And I don't think they go so much with the market for chemists. It goes more with the general expectation, economic expectation. If the times are getting bad, then we have more chemistry students because I guess they or their parents or friends, they tell them, study something that is difficult, but will guarantee you a job at the end. And you cannot have a modern society, we have it without any chemistry. So it's a safe bet. And I think this is correct, because if you look at the unemployment rates for chemists, I think it's always well below 3%, no matter how hard the times are. It fluctuates anywhere between 1.5 and 2.8% or something like this. So I think this is a true statement that it's a hard subject and it's in demand when the times are hard.
You already mentioned the Bologna system, so I would like to know about your opinion about this change in the education system.
Wow, that would be many more hours long session. I'll keep it short. I will tell you that I am not a fan of the Bologna system. And the reason is that I had the feeling that there is too much structure in it. And it makes studying more like a school experience. For me, university is the place where you develop your own personality, and you develop it by being self-determined, by making mistakes, by trying things, privately and professionally. Professionally, of course, you listen to this lecture and that lecture from unrelated subjects, and that's the fun of it. So I think there is too much of a corset that sort of writes down what the students have to listen to at what stage. The second aspect is that you collect your final grade over the years, which takes a lot of pressure away from the students. I understand that. That's a good thing for the students. But it also takes away that big final exam at the end where you have to show that you have penetrated an entire subject very well from all its angles, where you have to sort of make the connection between all the various aspects of chemistry. And that exam towards the end, I think, is very important in older systems, in the classic systems, that is no longer in the Bologna systems. And the final thing is, we were told that the Bologna system will unify, travels, study-related travels within Europe. You can go and have a semester in Gießen and the next one at Schreiner-rel University and the next one in Amsterdam, and you collect it all. At the end, you get your degree. And I don't see that happening, or I don't think it was a problem before Bologna.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a question. So Attila, please.
So thank you very much. So let's switch topic again a little bit. And I do not see myself now on the screen. I'm not sure.
I can see you, so I think we can see you.
Okay,
we
good.
can see you.
Okay, good. Thank you. So then maybe this is new information to some of the students, but there is a huge EU-funded program which would like to transfer the way we do science. So this important initiative contains like the European Open Science Cloud and the national initiatives for open science. So this is all open science, and Hungary also takes part in this open science initiative. So could you please share with us what you think about open science and where you see the most important benefits of the changes that will come when the ideas of open science will be employed by chemists?
Yeah, open science is an important topic for me because I think it should be very open. First of all, I think science is a wonderfully unifying endeavor, human endeavor that knows no borders. I can give you an example. On my first visit in China, I met with several researchers, and one was obviously doing chemistry that's related to mine. He could not speak a word of English or German. I could not speak a word of Chinese, and we still had an hour-long discussion just with the language of chemistry, drawing structures and everything, and we knew exactly what the other one was doing, what the questions were. This was a wonderful experience, and it told me there are no borders because science really unifies us. And the more people participate and understand this principle, the better. The second aspect of open science is not only open publications, but also our commitment to those that pay the money. In many countries, definitely in Germany and many other European countries, science is supported with tax money. Big tax euros. And so it is important for the public to ask the question, what are you doing with my money? And so we need to show them, not in scientific publications alone, but maybe also in the original data. They're very knowledgeable people that are not from our sciences that still like to know and still know how to read data. So let's take the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. I said this before, the scientists gather the data and then they suggest scenarios, but I'm not a virologist, but I still can ask, can I look at the infection data and I understand what exponential growth means? And then I can interpret this to myself. And I would like to see those original data. They should be open. They should be open in the public and accessible to everybody. So open science is a big thing, and it really is good for the sciences because it also makes people want to know more. And, knowledge is what we need to give to the people.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we can have another question from the audience. And the student asked, what do you think? Is it important for a student to pick a research topic as early as possible? Or is it better to explore different areas for a few years and decide later?
I would definitely decide later. Now, the early pinning down of a research project may work extremely well, and it may make that student, finish a degree, finish a paper, and get a job very quickly. That may be true, but I think it's more interesting to explore many avenues and then see how they connected and how they actually then come to one culmination point. I think that's the better way. You have to think about it as, investing into a bank. This is what my supervisor always said, you invest into your knowledge bank, your study bank, when you study chemistry or study whatever. And then for the rest of your life, you try to live off the interest. It's very investment you can make later in life. So the more you can invest, the more you can learn during this time. The better it is, the higher is your interest rate.
I think that's a very good advice. And Agnes has a question.
Coming to students, there's an interesting question that we struggled, and I'm quite sure you struggled with it too. And that was the practical aspect of educating chemists and not being able to accept students in person at laboratory practices. What was your solution to this challenge?
Well, it's terrible, to say it in one word. We were able to keep both the teaching labs open and the research labs open. So I know that not everybody was able or allowed to do that. But what we did is we basically thinned out the numbers. We went into working in shifts, extended the day. We reduced the work and said anybody who does not need to do lab work works from home. And of course, we do all talking through media like we use now. And otherwise, we work in shifts, an early shift, an afternoon shift. So we thinned out people to less than half what they typically were. We were also lucky because, in a chemistry building, actually typically the air conditioning and the airflow is very high because of the fume hoods and everything. So the air exchange in the building is rather high. So I think a chemistry building is in a lucky situation that it's actually one of the safer buildings. And to this day, knock on wood, we had not a single case of COVID-19 infection in chemistry in the area I can overlook.
That's very, very fortunate. I congratulate you.
Yes, I think we have been not that fortunate, though to some extent we did have lab practices for the students. We are not out of questions. We still have questions, but we are unfortunately out of time. So we need to wrap up this conversation. So to do that, I would like to ask Professor Schreiner whether he has something to say, maybe as his last words of this roundtable discussion.
Well, maybe I can address something to the students. It's very important for you that you listen to your inner quest. Don't have a gazillion people tell you what you need to do. As I said before, university study is also finding out who you are, what you can do well, and what you cannot do so well. It's also your time to learn to do the things better that you're not good at. So suck up any advice you can have to decrease your weak spots, but really follow what you want to do. What's in yourself. Don't do anything for your father, your mother, for your grandfather, whatever, or for your friend, or because it's good and somebody else does it. Do it because you want to do it.
That's an excellent advice, and I would like to thank you for participating in this roundtable discussion. I think we touched upon quite interesting topics, and I do hope that all those who listen to us learned something new or something wise. And now we have to continue with our conference. So thank you very much. And for all those
you guys
in this YouTube channel, I would like to ask them to go to the videos produced by the high school students. And the first video by a high school student will be broadcasted on this YouTube. And now is the time to watch that. So I would like to thank Peter, Agnes, and István for this nice discussion. And we will continue in the evening with the president of the American Chemical Society, Angela Wilson. Thank you very much for watching us.